Jacksonville. The child was born and couldn't sit still. 86 years later with no regret. You know that man can't sit still yet. The Great Depression couldn't get him down. He worked for his dad's store in town, collecting money in small amounts. The poor whites and blacks in their furniture accounts. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. Stetson Kennedy wants us all to be free. As he'd collect, he'd talk to folks. He'd hear legends, tales, songs, and jokes. Now this fine treasure he'd record and write. He was colorblind, didn't see black and white. Writer's project for the WPA. With Zora Neale Hurston, he earned his pay. Crackers and blacks, they talk for hours. It was a barefoot history of this land of flowers.
The week that was on the 27th of April 2019. This will be the last program for the month of April from WBRN Radio and on the Boston Red Network. The political news of the week basically was Joe Lunchbox Biden, a big part of it. This weekend, there are elections in Spain. Horty and I were talking about that last night and what it means for the Spanish people and what it means for Catalona, And also there was a summit in Vladivostok, the Russian Federation, with Chairman Kim of the Democratic Republic of Korea and the President of the Russian Federation, V.I. Putin. Basically, they went away with a basic framework for the Korean Peninsula. It wasn't reported very much in the U.S. here. We will have a program on that on BR on the World. And also we'll cover the Spanish election this weekend. So we have a number of things going on. We'll have a numbers man. That's our macroeconomics report. There is a new GDP figure out, 3.1%, I believe. We'll take a brief look here at it and where consumers are out of the University of Michigan. Things are upbeat. But Dr. Roma, she was an economic advisor to Barack Obama when he was president, basically saying that the economy moves along in comparison to the 90s. Now, the late 90s, if for those that recall, we had the dot-com boom, a little different situation there. And, of course, as things started to slow down, in 2000 when the election was stolen from Albert Gore of Tennessee by G.W. Bush and the gang, then came a recession. But that was just a precursor. That recession went and it came, and then, of course, G.W. was re-elected. Most people forget about G.W. now, but he did serve 2 terms. And that tells you a little bit about the American body politic, how a president was there for 8 years, and when he exits, people begin to forget about him. And of course, you had 8 years also Barack Obama. But Barack Obama began his presidency in a depression, basically speaking. And the vice president, of course, was no other than Joe Lunchbox Biden. when you are vice president for 8 years, you have a certain amount of name recognition. And at the same time, Biden brings the full strength of basically of the Monster Clinton supporters, those people that supported her. Many of them will be supporting him. And the Democratic machinery at the DMC, no doubt a majority of those people are behind Joe Biden. And you carry that over, you have in Iowa the establishment types there. Many of those that did support Hillary the Monster Clinton will be supporting Joe Biden. And that goes on to New Hampshire and on into Nevada. We'll see what happens there with the union vote there and whom they support. It's also a strong state for Bernie Sanders. And then you go to South Carolina. There are a number of candidates in this. We have Kamala Harris in South Carolina, Beto O'Rourke. A number of candidates there, more progressive than Joe Lunchbox Biden. So it'd be kind of an interesting situation where you have all these candidates, but so far the polling for many of them are in the single digits. Now it does not necessarily mean or equate that they will stay in the single digits. At this time next year, many of those candidates will drop out. We are in March. It'll be after April, Super Tuesday, etc. And it'll be a different landscape. And this is where my oncologist asked me the other day about where the election is going. Well, very difficult to say at this juncture. With DJ Trump, it basically rides on the economy, not on the Russian report or the Mueller report or whatever. It rides a lot of it on the economy. And with a good GDP figure and where the economy goes, where the commercial press input is, it is optimistic at this point in time. During Barack Obama's term, much of the information was pessimistic. So we have what's called the psychology of the economy. It was different. You had the conservatives at that time calling for the end to quantitative easing. Now they would like to have more quantitative easing. And also the situation with interest rates, they felt they were too low. Now DJ Trump would like to lower interest rates. So it's sort of a reversal there, and where Joe Lunchbox Biden will be in all of this. Advantages he has obviously is that he has basically the framework that the monster had. Some of it is not there, but at the same time, name recognition. Most of the people know who he is. Some of the other candidates not as much. Now when you go to Bernie Sanders, people know who Bernie is now. And I was reading somewhere, I think it was on Facebook, that some of the people there felt that Joe Biden could beat DJ Trump. That is correct. So could Bernie Sanders. So could some of the other candidates out there that are now competing for the nomination, but it will get much more competitive. Now there are basically two roads to travel here that the people that are in the single digits now, as Barack Obama was, as some of those go into double digits, the whole landscape starts to change, depending obviously on the candidate. And what moves where they are as we move more towards Iowa. We'll be paying attention to polling, say, out of Iowa. Not so much out of New Hampshire. New Hampshire is Bernie's backyard. Bernie will do well in New Hampshire. And it is a more conservative state, New Hampshire, but it's a small state. But it'll be important in the general election. What seems to be happening now is Joe Biden, Joe as he's known, is looking more towards the general election. And the same with DJ Trump. He's nationalized his campaign. He's looking towards the general election because he really doesn't have any competition at this time. Is a little bit different. But where we're looking is not only the nationalization of these candidates towards where they're going to be in the general election, but also where the international scene is, what is happening there, specifically in Venezuela. If there's a running war in Venezuela, where you would have a more emphasis on foreign policy. What DJ Trump would like to do is run against socialism. He could use Venezuela, Cuba, and to a certain extent Nicaragua. The problem is the American people waking up to that. They don't see Cuba as a threat, nor Nicaragua even less, and Venezuela less there also. And the petro situation there is different now than, say, would have been in the time of Barack Obama. The U.S. is now number one, number two, whichever way you want to put that up, in terms of petroleum or production. Natural gas, would be oil or whatever. So less geographic importance. The same way with Iran. Iran is more, as you move more to Venezuela, you're going to hear less and less about Iran, the Middle East in particular. Now, Biden, of course, is in bed with the Zionists, so you kind of take that out as the Democratic Party is. So those are some of the things here. Let's get to a little specifics here. We'll fall back on the Washington Post and start out where the money is. The Biden campaign raised $6.3 million in 24 hours. Very, very impressive there. And that would have been at the top of the 20 candidates, no doubt about that. And the campaign, that 65,000 donors were not on, he announced his campaign that were not on previous lists. We even got a solicitation from him. So he's using the old Barack Obama a list, and he had a fundraiser at some guy named David Cohen. He's a senior executive vice president of Comcast in Philadelphia. That's where they are located. Tickets maximum of $2,800. That's all one can give for the primary season, and $250 for so-called young professionals. It remains to be seen how much of these donations were in the amount of under $200. It will be more. The average donation online was about $41. The campaign said after Biden formally announced. Now, a little bit different. Bernie Sanders wears about $20 there, raised in 61% from new donors to the Biden campaign, and $4.9 million the amount was raised online. That is interesting for an old old school candidate like Joe Biden. Joe Biden's first haul was surpassed that of Beto O'Rourke. He had, let's see, who reported 6.1 million. Not very much. And Bernie Sanders 5.9. It's a lot of money on the first day out there. People will be looking incredibly heartened by the energy and enthusiasm displayed. This is more smoke and mirrors here. We have a picture of Joe Biden in a car in the passenger seat. You won't see very much of that. Let's go to Charlie Cook around, no doubt about that. This is from the Post. They also have an article here, but this doesn't really matter now. Joe Biden, the master of not quite getting it. And they refer back. We spent some time on the Anita Hill situation. We won't really spend the time now. Mark Hesse, a person here for the Post, on Thursday, the same day Biden formally announced his candidacy, news broke that he had talked to Anita Hill. Anita Hill is, of course, in the past in the Clarence Thomas hearing. The only thing that people remember now would be Dr. Ford's hearing, but Joe Biden himself said that things had not changed very much in terms of how the hearing was conducted with Dr. Ford. In fact, it was even more disorganized, so systemic problems where they have Republicans doing it in the Hill hearings, the Clarence Thomas hearings actually, was a little bit different. on The View. Tried to spoon feed Biden, and that is Joy Behar, I suppose, Behar. Anyway, whatever. Appropriate apology. I think what he'll want you to say is, I'm sorry for the way I treated you. I'm not sorry for the way you were treated. Biden doubled down. I'm sorry for the way she got treated, and I don't think I treated her badly. So he qualified that. Nothing new there. The hugs issue. All these things are trivial at this point in time. They will be forgotten. They already ran their course. And Joe Biden moves on. It's almost impossible to know how to deal with a candidate who almost gets it, but not quite. A different kind of candidate who is not just misses the point, but willfully ignores it. It's much easier to dismiss with a candidate like Biden, though, who has made serious efforts on issues of sexual assault, gender equality, so forth and so on. But he's effectively, all these candidates are running against DJ Trump, where it doesn't really matter. So this is the reason as far as DJ Trump's concerned, Anita Hill is not even history with him, nor is Dr. Ford, because the people that he is appealing to don't literally care. Period. They do care about Brett Kavanaugh, and the article goes on to say Joe Biden was deeply critical of the confirmation hearing for Kavanaugh was carried out, in particular the treatment of Kavanaugh's accuser, Christine Blasey Ford. In almost 30 years, the institutional culture has not changed. And a lot of the not changing institutional culture is beyond how these women were treated. It is the lobbyists and the whole setup there. It's actually got worse with Citizens United. Now lobbyists are running the hall willy-nilly, and whatever you can get away with is whatever you can get away with. At that time, at least people had to poise. Seeing how Anita Hill was treated led a generation of women to decide silence was a better option than coming forward to report they had been arrested. We're still paying for that fee 30 years ago, actually, what it was. And that's what Biden needs to apologize for, not for Anita Hill's personal anguish, not for individual, and this is a writer speaking here, Marsha Hasse. Anyway, not for individual women's personal discomfort with being hugged on the campaign trail, but for being an inaugural dagger of the hole we are still trying to shovel ourselves out of. Well, what Ms. Hasse said there is very, very important. It sums it up, not to personalize it, but it's to be remembered that Anita Hill was a Republican, and so was Clarence Thomas. I don't know what she is today, but we do recall that she opposed and was on the wrong side of the trial of the century involving the People versus Orenthal James Simpson, an all-American hero. And that did not earn her any brownie points with people like us. Let's go on to Charlie Cook. Come back to Social Security here. Reports out, and we'll append this on to find Mr. Cook. Charlie Cook, he's writing no doubt, let's see, where is he writing? This is in the Cook Report, but the National Journal. Anyway, go to his site, the Cook Report. Most of it now is paid type stuff, but we have a few here. Charlie Cook on the 26th of April. Democrats face a choice. We've heard many say President Trump is unqualified, unworthy for being president, that he behaves in a way beneath his position, that he has betrayed the office, and because of his actions and words, he deserves to be impeached or removed from power. If we stipulate all of that just for the sake of argument, does that mean the Democrats have an obligation to try to remove him from office, no matter how futile it is? Or more importantly, no matter how the consequences of pursuing such an action. Incidentally, there's a Washington Post ABC poll out that effectively says the same thing, that most Americans are at this time not for impeachment, but again, things do change. Any thought there are 67 senators votes to convict is beyond a fantasy. It's delusional. There aren't 20 Republicans who would join the 47 Democrats needed to reach the threshold for an effort to succeed. It's questionable whether even 2 Republican senators would, if anything. The Mueller report released last week reduces the chances of it happening because of a lack of a bombshell that to charge the way anyone looks at change the way at Trump. So what would be a point of impeaching him in the House? Is it to do is simple because of the House has a majority and can, or what would be the consequences for impeaching Trump and attempting to remove him from office, particularly with the public's opposition to it? While Trump has a terrible approval and a personal favorability numbers, a sizable number of Americans don't support removing him from office, and he's citing a CNN poll of 1,003 people here, found just 36% support impeaching Trump, while 59% do not. This is pretty much where the ABC poll was. Quinnipiac University poll found nearly identical results, with 35% agreeing there in the broader thing. We'd have to look at the polls. You always do, as to how many people were in it, with 68% of Democrats and 64% of liberals in the CNN poll supported impeachment and removal. Just 33% of independents and 37% of moderates did. Only 4% of Republicans and 17% of conservatives favor impeachment. That was in the Quinnipiac poll. Given the public opinion, the question is whether these Democrats will take a no for an answer. The Speaker, Pelosi, seems to remember what happened the last time a party impeached the president and attempted to remove him from office, when the public opposed it. Just let's say it didn't end well for that party or for the leader, Newt Gingrich, no doubt. But there were problems with Newt Gingrich. Anyway, we've heard some Democrats argue, how can we how can we not pursue impeachment? To not even attempt to remove him from office would. They argue, condone his behavior, his actions, his presidency, but Democrats should be asking themselves what the cost would be for a self-indulgence, as they are willing to do. Some feel morally bound to do it, even if it is a chance backfires. As in 1998, we remember 1998 against the Republicans. What if it improved Trump's re-election chances, and even made Democrats' retention of the House majority more difficult, particularly in those long-time Republican suburb areas around Dallas, Atlanta, Houston, Kansas City, Oklahoma City, and coastal South Carolina. Isn't that what they see as a moral imperative worth that risk? Is it asking that Bernie Sanders supporters, who in November of 16 opted to stay home or vote for Jill Stein rather than back Hillary Clinton? We don't apologize for that, incidentally. How did that work out for you? Well, worked out beautifully, according to DJ Trump. For all of the talk amongst conservatives and Republicans about Pelosi being a San Francisco liberal, it is a Baltimore pragmatist that seen since 2018 midterm election, It's clear both that a few people have a low opinion of Trump than she does, that she doesn't appreciate the lecture on how much Trump deserves to be removed from office. Pelosi has sat across the table from him more than anyone else. Seems determined and not to cave in and do anything that she is convinced is in the best interest of her party. There's no question that some Democrats and liberal groups see an opportunity in impeaching. What a better way to gravitize the party, to raise money, etc. We get these all the time, time to impeach, but time to waste time. Some Democrats seem to think American people will ultimately see what they see, understand what they understand, and reach the conclusion they have. Well, that could happen. Watergate was a struggle like that. Even after Watergate was over, some people felt that Tricky Dick should not have been forced out of office. How much more arrogant and elitist could those Democrats be? It is, if they are saying once the public is smart and wise as we are, they will agree with us. They are not, in our opinion, saying that as smart and wise. No, they are saying if they can present the evidence, more people will move in that direction. It also depends on what the commercial media is doing. And now Charlie Cook is a moderate. The people with capacity to be outraged by Trump already have been, no doubt about that. The people who have stuck with Trump through thick and thin, an old rhyme there, likely aren't going anywhere at this point. There's no doubt about this. This was published in the National Journal on the 23rd. Now, this is Amy Walter, used to be with ABC a long time ago, writing here, and restoration versus a revolution. A couple of weeks I noted that one way to look at the 2020 Democratic primary contest was to think of it as a battle between those candidates who want a revolution versus those candidates who want to see a more restoration. The leaders of the revolutionary wing, well, they are more the leaders of the evolutionary wing. Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren aren't running to simply replace Trump, but to bring serious structural changes to the country. This week, the leader of the restoration wing, Joe Lunchbox Biden, announced his candidacy. To Biden, it's not the system that is broken as much as the person in charge of the system. I believe history will look back on the 4 years of this president, and he will embrace an inherent an aberration in time. Not trying to write Joe's speech here. Biden says in his opening video, Biden is only running because of Trump, and Sanders and Warren would be running even if another Republican was there. No doubt about that. He's also running because it's opportune time to run. And I'm not sure, let me just try to see if I can get a little bit of this in. All right, Joe Biden announcing his candidacy for President of the United States. Back to Ms. Walter's article here. In that way, Biden is lots like many Democratic candidates who flooded into the congressional races in the 2018 cycle. They were much less politically seasoned than Biden, no doubt about that, but were still propelled into action by Trump's presidency. Like Biden, most of those Democratic congressional candidates emphasize not a radical change but a check on Trump's presidency. But most of those candidates were also running in suburban swing districts where the message of moderation was a winning strategy. Biden is running to win a much more diverse and ideological fragmented primary contest. Meanwhile, it is highly likely that Warren and Sanders would be running for president, even if it were President Cruz, Marco Vegas Rubio were running for re-election. His February presentation announcement video, Sanders said that his campaign is not only about defeating President Trump, the most dangerous president in history, it's about transforming our country and creating a government based upon principles of economic, social, racial, environmental justice. Our campaign is about taking on the powerful special interests. And this is where the progressive candidates should stand. Elizabeth Warren, she was in Lawrence, Massachusetts, made clear that she was not running against Trump. She's running against the system, because the man in the White House is not the cause of what's broken. He is just the latest and most extreme symptom of what is going wrong in America, a product of a rigged system that props up the rich and powerful and kicks dirt on everyone else. And so once he's gone, we can't pretend that all this will never happen again. We can't afford to just tinker around the edges, a tax credit here, a regulation there. That's the old American pragmatism that's got us nowhere at all. There are a bunch of other candidates in the race, of course, but most fall closer to the restoration wing of the revolution. For example, Kamala Harris and Cory Twitter King Booker are running as agents of change, but they're calling it within the lines and with a caution that Sanders and Warren do not display. To me, the big question for the next month is if Biden will take the fight directly to the revolutionaries in a way that the other candidates have not. Biden gives us some hint as to his thinking back in early April, asked by a reporter to explain what he calls himself the most progressive candidate in the race. Biden took a not so veil swipe at Sanders, but my point is that the definition of progressive now seems to be changing. That is, are you a socialist? Well, that's really progressive, or you believe in whatever. So I was talking about up until the latest time around traditional judgments of whether or not you were quoted a liberal was, whether or not in what position on race were on women, what your position on the LGBT community, what's your position on the civil liberties. You know, I stuck my record on those things against anybody. Who's ever running and who runs and who will run. To be sure, there are plenty of Democrats who would be happy to stack up their records of women and a race with Biden after Biden's 40-year track record on those issues is littered with inconsistencies, no doubt about that. But the nation is inconsistent. Just this week, and we'll have a special, incidentally, on Sheet of People forum in Houston, interviewed with people of color attending the event by AP, found lots of ambivalence towards Biden's candidacy, as African American women repeatedly pointed to singular issues plaguing Biden's handling of the 1991 Supreme Court confirmation of Clarence Thomas and the Senate Judiciary Committee's treating of Anita Hill. They were also barked at earlier conventional wisdom of Biden as a safe electoral choice. I know that we have been a culture to feel only a white man can save us. That is the Lamarck, Texas organizers said, I don't feel like Biden is our answer. Before the day, Biden had spent much of his pre-candidacy apologizing for and explaining his work on the 1994 crime bill, his handling of Anita Hill, and literally handing of a hands-on style of personal interaction. Now he has a chance to pivot to the offense, to reset the rules, and to rein in the game that have, until this point, been set by Bernie Sanders. Let's see. Well, no doubt Bernie is also a skilled politician. He's been around for a very, very long time. Now let me pivot here, as they say, see what we can get in here. Wait a minute here. Social Security. Not sure we'll do this here or not, but report that was out. The authoritative book, the 2019 annual report of Social Security and Medicare trustees, was, as often in the past, a reminder that two key programs are dependent on those giant piles of money. Social Security and Medicare face long-term financial challenges, according to the report. Social Security costs will exceed its income next year. Financial challenges, according to the report, Social Security costs will exceed its income next year for the first time in in 38 years. Medicare too will soon be running in the red. Both programs have will exhaust their reserves by 2035, roughly 15, 16 years out there. But there's also something called the Social Security Disability Income Fund, DI Trust Fund, which helps non-elderly people, the sick and injured at work. Has gotten an unexpected and apparently doable new lease on life. In 2015, the trustees warned that the fund's reserves might not be able to cover 100% of the expected benefits in 2016. Now they see it as sufficient to cover the obligations through 2052. Bernie Sanders talked about this. A lot of this is smoke and mirrors. The system is not is in trouble, as some of the right wingers want you to say. The report notes disability applications have been declining since 2010, and the number of disabled worker benefits have been falling since 2014. Spending has been flat, roughly at $140 billion per year for the past half decade, 5 years. Meanwhile, modest and workers are generally painless administrative reforms, retraining of judges to make more accurate benefit award decisions, accurate work on backlog disability reviews, also helping contain the program growth and the existence of expanded health care for the working poor under Obamacare. So they put it in there. The second lesson, therefore, is that one of many reasons to pursue sustained and sustainable economic growth is a positive effect on federal entitlement programs. That's been talked about, and that is also talked about for Medicare for All as a future investment in sustainable health care. Given the chance of an unhappy surprise, the wise response to the disability reprieve is to make necessary structural changes in case the wolf comes back to the door. That was in the Depression. The wolf was at the door, and it was out there. And this, again, is more tinkering around the edges. Okay. We'll just sign a little note about the economy here, not very much, because we'll cover this on Numbers Man, expanded at what I said 3.1 to 3.2 annualized rate that was out from the Bureau of Economic Analysis. Many economists, of course, had predicted anemic growth. Well, anemic growth is there, but this thing goes back and forth. In some ways, the economy feels like 1998, 1999. And you don't want to go there because you had a tech boom going on at that time. It seems like the Goldilocks scenario of strong growth and benign inflation is really happening, much like in the 90s. That's Neil Duda, head of economic research at Renaissance Macro Research. Anyway, the University of Michigan released their numbers, what they put it at 53% of consumers are there. Dr. Roma, we talked about her. She's a professor at Berkeley, former head of the Council of Economic Advisors on Barack Obama. Another recession will surely come at this point, and we are going to enter that next recession in a difficult period. The federal government is on track to run a deficit of nearly $1 trillion this year because of government spending. And the U.S. is the only major economic or economy projected to increase its debt at a percentage of GDP over the next 5 years. As from the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, we'll leave this as is, and we'll skip on, segue to sport. Virginia, who won the college men's basketball team, said they will not visit the White House. That's from Tom Barrett. He is the coach there. Who will not visit the White House, said in a statement on a Friday. We have received inquiries about a visit to the White House. This is Bennett said, and with several players either pursuing pro opportunities and moving from the University of Virginia, it would be difficult, if not impossible, to get everyone back together. A good way of doing it. The announcement came less than 2 weeks after Bennett during a news conference on the 13th, following a ceremony at Scott Stadium in Charlottesville, honoring the Cavaliers, first faced the question of whether he and his players would accept an invitation to the White House. And DJ Trump on Friday said his initial comments about the anyway. This is in Charlottesville. Was a reference to supporters of Robert E. Lee. That's worse. And he said before, I've answered that question. If you look at what I said, you will see that the question was answered perfectly. His remarks, it came the day after. This is Vice President Biden in Charlottesville there. The Cavaliers became the third consecutive national championship men's team not to visit the White House because of Trump. So that is where that goes. And what's happening? The Baylor women's team winner this year of their team recently accepted an invitation. That's sad. But they did accept it. So anyway, they can go wherever they want to go. Let's get Uncle Carl. I don't want to forget Uncle Carl here. Uncle Carl, he's talking about Ilhan Omar blames America first. No doubt, 6 days after the 9/11 attacks, G.W. Bush appeared at Islamic Center in Washington. You won't see that today, to meet with leaders of the Muslim community. The American people were appalled and outraged at last Tuesday's attack, and so were the Muslims across the world. The president told the nation. He added that terrorist acts of violence against innocents violate the fundamental tenets of Islam. GW quoted the Quran, in the long run, evil in the extreme will be the end of those who do evil. He condemned the hijackers for perverting the Muslim faith. The face of terrorism is not the true face of Islam. Islam is peace, no doubt about that. Salam alaikum. He reminded viewers that the American court counts Muslims amongst its citizens, and condemned those who would intimidate Muslim Americans, saying that they should be ashamed. I guess GW DJ didn't listen to that. The president closed by declaring that the U.S. is a great country because we share the same values and respect the dignity and human worth. Gesturing to the imams next to him, he said, "It is my honor to be meeting with leaders who feel just the same way as I do. They were outraged, they were sad, they love America. Americans need to hear these kinds of words, and at this moment, so to the rest of the world, it signaled that America's fight was with Islamic extremists, not with every Muslim on the face of the earth." My words, not Uncle Carl's. I helped plan the event. Two of my aides worked on the arrangement, and I believe it was vital and helped unite and calm the country. I recount this because many Democrats brand as anti-Muslim bigotry anyone who is critical of the representative from Minnesota, Ilhan Omar, for referring to the 9/11 attacks as some people did something. That's not what she said. Again, this is a blunt lie. Ms. Omar's statement about the deadliest attack on the homeland in history was evasive, insensitive, and dismissive. That's an American Muslim elected official who would not condemn the terrorists and the evil acts is unbelievable. In the words of Dan Crenshaw himself, a decorated veteran of the war on terror and ex-CIA agent. Anyway, so we're So are the comments by leading Democrats who defend Representative Omar. Bernie Sanders hails her strength and courage. Elizabeth Warren accused the president of inciting violence against a sitting congressional congresswoman for tweeting condemnations of Ms. Omar. Okay. The sentiment must be at the top of Democratic Party's talking points. Beto O'Rourke echoed Ms. Warren's accusing the president of incitement to violence, while Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez called the criticism of Representative Omar incitement of violence against progressive women of color. No doubt about that. Leaders of more than 20 left-wing organizations and the American Federation of Teachers, the NAACP demanded that Speaker Pelosi defend the Minnesota freshman, arguing that it's because of her strident leadership of progressive values, as well as her identity as the first. Now this is just beautiful. First black Muslim woman in Congress. That she is a target of consistent racist and bigoted attacks from DJ Trump and even at this time Democratic colleagues. Well, there's a lot going on here. You term black Muslims to begin with. Elijah Muhammad, he was the head at one time of the Nation of Islam. He's now dead, but he talked about that and that they never call themselves black Muslims. That was in the Wallace, or Mike Wallace, late Mike Wallace. A report for CBS, the Hate Bill, effectively was a title of it. But they were Muslims. And this is what he's doing here. This is kind of unfortunate disservice to G.W. Bush, who tried to bring the nation together. And this is whole American First thing here. Blames America First. Well, America First is a nationalistic program. Everybody knows that. It's a bigoted program. And a president would equate freedom fighters that were demonstrating against fascists in Charlottesville, Virginia. Heber was killed there. And this is just unbelievable. Anyway, nonetheless, let's go to ESPN. I guess here we go. No, here we don't go. Incidentally, also, before I forget here, there's a battle over at the NRA with Wayne LaPierre and Oliver North. You remember him? He was a guy caught selling arms, tow missiles to Iran. Anyway, that was during Reagan's administration. Now they're in a big fight over the leadership of the NRA. All right. So now we'll go to ESPN. We can do this fairly quickly because the Warriors are 129 to 110 over the LA Clippers, and they win the series 4-2. So that is the end of that particular battle there. And let's see, what do we have here? Yeah, wait a minute here. I'm going to have to do the National Hockey League separately. Alright, we'll have to find them and figure out where baseball took off to here. Well, we kind of do this out of order. Anyway, nonetheless, the Hurricanes 1-0 for the Islands in an overtime. This is game 1. Let's look down here. This is the second round. Game 1, Hurricanes lead it 1-0. And then we go to the Sharks and Avalanche. This is the second round of Game 1. Sharks lead the series 1-0. The Sharks of San Jose Sharks. All right, this is hockey. And now we'll find somewhere hiding here baseball. On our lineup card here. Oops. I guess we're going to have to go back here. Anyway, this is okay. We gave the basketball contest. For whatever reason, we'll have to back up a little bit here to a Major League Baseball and get those scores in Thursday night. The Padres 4-3 over the Nationals in D.C. Phillies finally win a game over the Marlins 4-0. Toronto 4-2 over the Athletics. That was in Toronto. Brewers 10-2 over the Mets. The Rockies outlasted Atlanta 8-4. Cleveland 6-3 over the Astros. You don't win a game on the Astros very much in Houston. Anyway, the White Sox on the south side, big fight went on there. 12-11 over the Tigers of Detroit. And the Twins win one at home, 6-1 over the Orioles. Orioles have been having big problems. And the Angels in Kansas City, 5-1 over the Royals. And the Reds and Cardinals in St. Louis, it was all Reds, 12-1. The Reds have a good team this year. And the Cubbies were defeated in Arizona 8-3 by the Diamondbacks. Dodgers win 6-2 in Los Angeles over the Pirates. And in 11, the Mariners pull it out over Texas 5-4. The Yankees 7-3 over the Giants in San Francisco. And the Rays and Red Sox were rained out. I believe they were rained out. Yeah. Anyway, there'll be a makeup game there. This will do it for us. We'll see you once again on the Monday Morning Quarterback. We'll have Numbers Man that will be talking about the tenuous economy later today. And we probably will have an open source report. Now, we have some special programming here. Our installment in the murder trial of Justine Ruchek Damon out in the Midwest. The prosecution and defense have rested, and they will sum it up on Monday. We'll talk about that and the knocks, noises, etc. going on in that particular case. And we'll have also She the People out of Houston. We'll do that program. And we just wrapped Joe Biden into this program, so we don't have to do a special on Joe Biden, Anita Hill, and whatever else from 20 years ago, and Joe Biden hugging people on the campaign trail. It really won't matter. But highlighting here, we had Mr. Cook. We heard from him. And the impeachment word, where the impeachment is going, where impeachment's not going, is not going over very well with the public at this point in time. But again, that's a legalistic situation and a little bit hard to get one's hand around based upon what they now know from the Mueller report. In Watergate, we actually had physical burglaries where thugs were breaking into psychologists' offices, etc. And it was a different time. The nation was much more progressive at that time in the 70s than they are at the present time here coming out of the 60s. What you have now is the 50s and the anti-communism are now out here with DJ Trump. So you're getting into that kind of a backdrop here. Is a very interesting backdrop, but DJ Trump is no General Eisenhower for certain. Nor actually is he a Tricky Dicky, where Tricky Dick was able in 1968 to get in on a Law and Order program. DJ Trump is working all of those situations, but there are less of those people around these days. So that's where it's going to be very, very interesting indeed. Have a good weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you on this part of the channel, the Boston Red Political channel on the Monday Morning Quarterback.
The author of one of the great documents in human history. We know it by heart. We hold these truths to be self-evident. that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. We've heard it so often it's almost a cliche, but it's who we are. We haven't always lived up to these ideals. Jefferson himself didn't, but we have never before walked away from them. Charlottesville is also home to a defining moment for this nation in the last few years. I was there on August of 2017. We saw Klansmen and white supremacists and neo-Nazis come out in the open. Their crazed faces, illuminated by torches, veins and bulging, and bearing the fangs of racism, chanting the same anti-Semitic bile heard across Europe in the 30s. And they were met by a courageous group of Americans, and a violent clash ensued, and a brave young woman lost her life. And that's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation. He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides? Those words, the President of the United States assigned a moral equivalence between those spreading hate and those with the courage to stand against it. And in that moment, I knew the threat to this nation was unlike any I had ever seen in my lifetime. I wrote at the time that we're in the battle for the soul of this nation. Well, that's even more true today. We are in the battle for the soul of this nation. I believe history will look back on 4 years of this president and all he embraces as an aberrant moment in time. But if we give Donald Trump 8 years in the White House, he will forever and fundamentally alter the character of this nation, who we are, and I cannot stand by and watch that happen. The core values of this nation, our standing in the world, our very democracy, everything that has made America America is at stake. That's why today I'm announcing my candidacy for President of the United States. Folks, America's an idea that's stronger than any army, bigger than any ocean, more powerful than any dictator or tyrant. It gives hope to the most desperate people on earth. It guarantees that everyone is treated with dignity and gives hate no safe harbor. It instills in every person in this country the belief that no matter where you start in life, there's nothing you can't achieve if you work at it. That's what we believe. And above all else, that's what's at stake in this election. We can't forget what happened in Charlottesville. Even more important, we have to remember who we are. This is America.